My name is Kyle, and I'll be responding to Armando's claim that the U.S. is not strict enough on their policy to control gun violence. His first secondary claim is that gun violence has a higher death rate than any other problem in the U.S. His second secondary claim is that households with more guns have higher rates of suicide in teenagers. And his third claim is that people tend to have more guns due to the availability and portrayal of guns. So, in response to his first claim that gun violence has a higher death rate than any other problem in the U.S., this assertion is entirely false. Statistics from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention says that the number one highest death cause in the U.S. is heart disease. Number 2 is cancer, and number 3 is respiratory diseases, with heart disease taking over 600,000 lives per year and gun violence only taking 11,000 lives. He goes on to use an example that says that Phoenix's murder rate is 10.6 per capita versus Mexico's 10. And this example is an outlier because from the same report from the Atlantic, he goes on to say that America's total gun violence is only 3 per capita. His second secondary claim is that the number of households that have guns is lower, but the homicide rate is still very high. He states that people with more guns are more likely to kill other people, but when discussing the amount of guns per state versus gun deaths per capita, David Fredoso, editor of the Washington Examiner, says that this is what happens when you just look at the relevant numbers, instead of cherry picking whatever numbers tell the story you want. There's no significant statistical correlation here. He's saying that when you take all the numbers as a whole, you can't say that states with more guns have more gun violence. In fact, Arizona, which has one of the highest gun ownership rates, also has one of the lowest gun violence rates in America. He also makes the inference that a greater number of guns leads to higher homicide rates, but the University of Michigan professor of economics and finance, Mark Perry, says that the number of guns per Americans increased from 0.93 per person in 1933 to 1.45 in 2013, which is a 56% increase in the number of guns per person, when during that same time period, gun violence decreased by 49%. He also makes the claim that people who buy guns are more likely to buy more guns, and he says that the average owner has an average of 8 guns. This statistic is blown out of proportion due to the fact that 20% of all gun owners own 65% of the total firearms. And that's a statistic from the Harvard School of Public Health study. Armando's third claim is that the availability and portrayal of guns in our culture leads to more people wanting guns. Armando makes the point that keeping a gun in the house often leads to it being found and leads to an unintentional death. Dustin Hawkins, a conservative politics expert, says that of all the gun deaths in the US, only 3% of them are due to accidents. Armando goes on to make the point that people purchase guns out of a fear of having more guns, which leads to higher rates of crimes and higher rates of homicides. This conclusion does not have any statistical backing and is unwarranted. In fact, a 2013 national survey conducted by the Pew Research Center found that less than half of all gun owners own a gun for self-protection. So, in conclusion, Armando states that the statistics he provided prove that there is not a strict enough gun policy in the US. However, given that 1, gun violence is not the greatest cause of deaths, 2, homicide rates are inversely proportional to gun ownership, and 3, that less than half of all gun owners own a gun for self-protection, it is reasonable to assume that increasing regulation on gun control in the US will not reduce homicide rates.
All right, structurally you lay everything out pretty clearly. I thought you had good data on the first point, talking about the gun violence compared to other sources of death, suggesting that the advocate is, kind of exaggerated the importance of gun violence as a source of death in the United States. The comparison with Phoenix in Mexico was never clear from the advocate's point of view. It's still not clear here. I don't know exactly what the statistic is that you are presenting. I think there's a little ambiguity on that particular point, and I don't know what it gets either person involved in this argument. On the ownership issue, though, I thought that you did a good job showing that there is a problem with the way the advocate is using the evidence, that they are looking at information in a way that's going to give them a conclusion that they already start with, and when you look at more general information, you're not going to see that relationship. You had good sources that you cited to suggest that the ownership rate has increased and the gun violence has decreased. We've got some per capita comparisons. You've also got a couple of explanations about why gun per capita ownership exists the way it does. I think you minimize the importance of guns as a source of accidental deaths adequately. I thought you had a pretty good summary of the argument. I think at the end, your conclusion is relatively clearly stated. All right, thank you.